feeling, need, and request. And then at the same time, I'm going to tell you it doesn't matter what you say. You can say it however you like. You do not need to speak in observation, feeling, need, request if you are speaking from a place that that model points you to. And so it reminds me of the saying, I don't remember where it's from, where the wise sage saw the moon in the sky and pointed at the moon so that the people would see the moon, and they worshipped the finger. Right? They missed the point. And so with a communication model, it's very easy to miss the point and to think that this is about speaking differently. And it's really not going to be about speaking differently, although it really is about speaking differently. So when I'm giving you a lot of contradictions today, please go ahead and stop me when it feels like you've lost me completely, and I'll slow down and I'll try and catch everybody up. We're back, yes?
I just want to say, from a surgical perspective in learning,
yes?
We train residents and they learn how to tie knots.
Yeah.
And they learn how to open the belly or whatever. And you're very precise about the various things that you do.
Yes.
After time, you can conduct an operation in whatever way you want.
Yes.
And that's the art piece.
Yes.
It all comes together. And so for me, the process, the 4-step process, that was like tying knots.
Yes.
And I think that for some people it may be very, very valuable to really hone in on that.
Yes.
And get that mindset going. And
Yes.
then you can expand it into the conduct of your
Yes.
operation.
I really love that, Mike. Thank you for naming that. Because I sometimes have a discomfort in walking you very specifically through what we think of as classical NVC, the particulars of the model, because I'm so invested in you understanding that that's not really the thing, but it is an extremely valuable inner practice to get you to the place that you're trying to get to. So I start with that. The intention is to get into a place of empathic, compassionate presence with yourself and others. And to the degree that the language practice gets in the way, favor the presence and the empathy over the right and wrong words. And then hold yourself with discipline to practicing the right and wrong words, knowing that that's just a practice and a tool to bridge you into a new way of being. Is that helpful to people? Yes?
Perhaps this is a little too simplistic, but when I look at this, the words that really speak to me are precious gift.
Yes?
And the reason being that when I'm communicating with someone else, they are a precious gift to
Yes.
me. And vice versa,
Mhm.
at the same time, I am a precious gift in return, so that this dialogue should be on the level of giving and receiving and loving between the two.
Absolutely. Yes.
Maybe that's too simplistic.
No, I don't think that's simplistic at all. And the way that Marshall Rosenberg would talk about that is, what do we need to do to see each other's humanity and divine essence? And then what gets in the way of connecting with one another at that level? And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and hopefully give you some tools to practice as you leave at the end of the day. So I'm going to dive into concepts, but please, like I said earlier, stop me at any time, raise your hands. It can be conversational. And at the same time, there are a few foundational things that I want to make sure to set up for you. And let me give you a quick outline so that I can also for myself hold myself to a quick outline. I first want to talk a little bit about where we come from, the programming that we come into adulthood with, and just map that out really quickly. And then I want to talk about how this particular communication model walks us into a different place and how we might use that. Okay. So generally when we come into communication, and I also want to tell you communication is far more than words. I know you all know this, but I still want to emphasize the fact that you are never not communicating. The only thing you are ever doing in some way is communicating and listening. And words are a minor piece of it. they are also going to be a very powerful piece for transforming what's happening. But your body language, your facial expression, your tone of voice, whether or not you are in your very being constricted and tense and feeling rigid, or absolutely relaxed and comfortable in your own being, is communicating to other people all the time. And that's a fundamental thing that we're trying to get to when we're practicing the language of compassion, that we look at communication as a whole body experience and a whole body felt sense experience of one another. So there are many, many parts that become important to be aware of. So most of us come into dialogue. I'm going to jump into this just with sort of a dialogue practice. You've talked a little bit this morning about some situations that you've had a hard time with. And so I want to go and talk to this other person about some problem that I have usually, right? Something has happened. I have some feelings about it. I don't like the way it's going. And so I'm going to sit down with you and have a conversation with you about this problem that I have. And most of us are trained to move into relationship and into dialogue through the frame of what is wrong. And we tend to think through the frame of what is wrong. I'm feeling something, something must be wrong. And then my problem solver comes in, because if something is wrong, I need to figure out in my mind what is wrong. And generally, I'm overgeneralizing, but it's going to be either there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with you. Right? I mean, generally it sort of boils down to these two things. And so if I have now evaluated that there's something wrong with me, what that means is that a lot of self-judgment is getting activated for me. I am beginning to tell myself a story about myself. And it may be that I'm too depressed, I'm too anxious, I'm too passive, I'm too introverted, I'm too reactive, I'm too angry, I'm too aggressive. We have a lot of things that we were given as children about who we are, and we've internalized them, and then they kick in, and so I've got a lot of theories about all of the things that are wrong with me, and then I'm likely to feel more depressed, or I'm likely to feel more anxious. And if I do this a lot, I'm going to see a lot more learned helplessness. And generally, I'm suffering. Because a lot of evaluations of what is wrong with me have gotten activated. And this is when I see people coming to therapy, right? Because they've decided something is wrong with them, and then we treat ourselves like projects that need to be fixed, and we present ourselves to experts who are supposed to know how to fix us, which in some ways perpetuates the very problem that is bringing us in. If I think that there's something wrong with you, because really I did it perfectly this time, because I've been to a training and I said it right for once, and so the problem is your reaction, because you're reacting the way you always did, and I'm the only one changing here, so I'm fine and you're not, right? Then I'm likely to feel, if I think that you are the problem, I am likely to feel more angry, and I'm likely to feel more self-righteous. And there we swing in our relationships, in simple terms. I'm either angry and feeling self-righteous because I'm right this time, and therefore you need to change, and I'm going to educate you in all the things that I want you to change. And the way that I try and get you to change is by telling you what's wrong with you. Right? And if you would only do it like this, that, and the next thing, then finally we would have a good relationship. And we long for the other person to one day say to us, "You're right. That was really helpful. Thank you for the awareness. I didn't see all of these things about myself before. I now know what to do. I will change." Generally, we don't get that reaction from other people. What we stimulate instead is a lot of defensiveness. This is sounding familiar? Okay. So this model that most of us come into adulthood with isn't working well, because we have inherited a language of domination, essentially. This is domination language. And domination functions in a power hierarchy where somebody is going to be right, which means that somebody needs to be wrong. Somebody is going to be healthy, which means somebody needs to be unhealthy. Somebody has access to resources, which means somebody else does not have access to resources. And what happens is it sets us up to feel like we need to compete with one another and jockey for position and prove our worthiness a lot in our relationships. It makes it very difficult to relax with one another. You with me so far? Okay. Domination language stimulates defensiveness and disconnection between people. And there's, Marshall Rosenberg talks about a specific categories of language that are likely to increase disconnection from one another and that are likely to make it difficult for us to get the kind of intimacy, understanding, and connection that we're often wanting. One of them is diagnosing one another. So we use the language of diagnosis. I'll tell you that the problem with you is that you're narcissistic. That is my diagnosis of you. You are too selfish, and therefore that's where our problem is, so you need to go and get fixed. Okay? Another one is, so we have diagnosis is one, making demands of other people, where I tell you that you don't have any choice. You have to go and clean your room. And the reason you have to do it is because you just have to learn how to clean your room, because one day you're going to be a grown-up and running your own house, and these are just things people have to do. Every time that we use have to language, must language, should language, and we make demands of other people, we are setting up a power struggle. Because when I tell you you have to do something, I'm only giving you two choices. You can rebel or you can submit. Right? You can say, yes, fine, I'll do it, or no, I'm not going to. And if I've made a demand and you don't really feel like you have a lot of choice and you choose to submit to me, I am going to pay for that submission later. Is that making sense? Because this is not given willingly. It's actually coming with some toxic degree of resentment. And even if it's really, really minor, if our relationship is characterized by demands and have-tos and what you need to do for me, then it's going to build up over time, and we're going to increasingly feel resentful of the things that we actually would like to enjoy doing. You know, for example, when I was a kid, I still do actually, all my life, I love reading. I can devour books. I can sit in a room and I can read books all day long and be incredibly energized at the end of it. It is one of my very favorite things to do. But once I went through school, and especially in high school, where you get your list of the books you have to read, it was the most torturous, painful thing in the world for me to read those books, even though I intrinsically adore reading and a wide variety of kinds of books. But the moment you tell me you have to read it and you have to read these pages on this day, it's taken the joy of reading out for me. And then what I have inside of me is nothing but a ton of resentment and resistance to doing this thing. And it's unfortunate because I actually have a lot of intrinsic motivation that some of my high school teachers would never have known about, given my behaviors in their classes of not doing my reading and not being prepared for discussion. So when we tell one another things that we have to do and we take away choice for a human being, that leads to some kind of disconnection, often an internal one. The other kind of language is denial of choice. And you see this in a domination system. It's extremely dangerous language. Because denial of choice is when we hear things like, I was a teacher for many, many years, and so I'd find myself saying things like, you know, there's nothing I can do about this because this is just school policy. So I'm going to enact some rule or some consequence or some punishment, usually in a school, and really I can dole it out, but then if I see the kid in pain, I have no responsibility. You know, I'm just doing my job. I'm just doing what I was told to do. Very, very dangerous language if we're going to be studying compassion or the study of nonviolence and peacemaking in the world. Because it puts us in a position where internally we get disconnected from our own power. We forget that we have the power to choose in any given moment the things we're wanting to support and the things we're not wanting to support. And it puts us in a mind frame where we are able to enact things that if we were really in touch with our hearts, we wouldn't be enacting. Is that just pausing for a moment to find out if you have any questions on any of that so far? Yes?
The point is that sometimes we don't have a choice. For example, in my work, I'm an executive for a financial institution. When an employee comes to me and says, I need access to Facebook for my work computer, I don't have a choice.
Yes.
I can't. And school, the employee becomes angry and
yes.
irritated, but
yes.
there is no other solution.
Yes. Okay, so what I think you're pointing to is that we have the internal experience of believing that we have no choice, when I would suggest to you that you are choosing in that moment to submit to a demand that somebody is making of you because it meets other needs of yours. And that the shift of recognizing that I'm choosing something is the most important shift that I'm just wanting to point to in the moment. It doesn't mean that I may like the options that I have. It doesn't mean when I say, you're always choosing in any given moment that you can have whatever you want, because we have a limited range of options in any given moment. But I may choose, I'll give you, in a work example, I may choose to give this person access to Facebook or whatever it was that you were saying, because that meets my needs for financial sustainability, safety, security, predictability, and having employment. To the degree that I am in the consciousness that I am choosing this even though I'm not liking it, my experience is going to be very different than when I fall into the consciousness of, I don't have a choice, I just have to do what people tell me to do. We're more likely to feel like victims, and we're more likely to not enjoy or see options in our lives when we have that mental frame. But to the point you're bringing up, we may not like any of the options we have. I mean, I'll tell you, when I was 10 and the choice was clean my room or let mom rage at me, I chose to clean my room. Now, if I can stay in a place where I'm choosing this, if my internal experience is I'm choosing to clean my room because I'm really using this as a strategy to help mom calm down, then my experience of myself and my internal connection with my own empowerment is qualitatively different than when I am in my fight-flight mode of, I have to do what people say, the world is a dangerous place, and I don't have any choices, and I train myself to get the approval of an authority figure for my experience of being okay in the world. How does that land on you? Do you see it's very subtle. It's a very subtle.
And when that, we created a kiosk, so they can go on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
on the kiosk, but nevertheless, now people are still upset because they want Facebook on their work computer,
Uh-huh.
which is,
Yes.
can't do that.
Yes, yes. And so if we're practicing nonviolent communication in this situation, and I'm the decision maker in the company saying, they are wanting such and such, they are wanting Facebook on every work computer, and I am choosing to make it available to you in kiosk form, and I understand that you would like something different, but this is the choice that I'm making. It's already a different experience for everybody than me saying, well, I can't.
But nevertheless, there are still people who the only solution is their option.
Yes. Okay, so now you're bringing up a very, this is what we get into, right? Because we get into this mind frame where we get extremely attached to our strategies. Because in this world of what is wrong, most of us, we're very clever people. We have a solution to what is wrong. We know what's going to make it better. And then we enter into dialogue with others with our solution in the frame of domination. I have to get you to see it my way. I've got to convince you that this is the best way. And instantly, the way in which we are communicating with one another, the way I position myself, is to convince you, explain you, win over you, and get my way. And so when we're in that mind frame, it's difficult for us to see options, and it's very difficult for us to work with one another creatively. Because what I am doing is I've turned you into an object, and I relate to you as an object, as opposed to another subjective reality. And then this denial of choice, which happens in institutions and systems, then I also sometimes treat myself as an object. I get disconnected from my own power of choice and empowerment in every situation, and I take on the role of simply being the implementer of some authority figure's stuff. And then we have genocide in its extreme version. Because what that leads to is, I have no responsibility in the moment for what I'm doing. I will put all of these people on trains because I was told to. And I'm sure somebody else has some good higher power here. I will go ahead and go off to war and shoot all of these people because somebody else is telling me that this is a good thing to do, and my job is to follow directions. And so this is just a dangerous way of living. And so what I'm suggesting is, what Marshall says is, when we get into this place of denial of choice, it is easier for us to dehumanize ourselves and one another. And the moment we dehumanize ourselves and one another, we are able to treat each other in ways that we would not if we hadn't dehumanized ourselves and one another. And a piece of that is staying connected to the fact that I am choosing in every moment the way that I am thinking and being. Okay, so it's a simple switch. You know, if you want to just play with this in your own lives, test it out. Don't take my word for it. I mean, really go test it out. It may not be something that resonates for you. But what is it like when every time you tell yourself, I have to blah, 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 you take a moment and say, wait, I'm choosing to get up at 5 in the morning because these are the needs I'm trying to meet. Or I choose to go to this job that I really do not enjoy and causes me a lot of strife because there are needs that I'm trying to meet that are important to me that make it possible for me to tolerate this discomfort. It changes your experience of what you're doing. Yes?
And by the way, I would say, you know, of course it's not pleasant to be the one having to submit. It's really not pleasant to be the one feeling like you're dominating all the time.
No, it isn't. Both sides suffer. It doesn't matter what role you're playing. There is suffering when you're in domination role, and there is suffering when you're in oppressed role. And for most of us, we've internalized these systems. The reason I go through them with you is because you've probably, if you've grown up anything like me, you've grown up in cultures that have some degree of this in them, and now you've internalized them. And your self-help strategies and your getting better strategies are likely some degree of a domination system that you've internalized. And we want to understand this really well if we want to make choices that are in the service of compassion, or empathy, or integration, or collaboration, or teamwork, or peace building. Whatever it is that you know floats your boat on that. If I just want an intimate partnership with my spouse, domination will not get you there. Does that make sense? Last one is deserve language. The other language that we want to be very, very careful of is any kind of deserve language. Because deserve language encourages and supports punitive systems of justice, and perpetuates the idea that there are good people and bad people, and that bad people deserve to suffer, and that good people are happy and deserve reward and punishment. And therefore, if you are suffering, it reduces my ability to have compassion for you, because any degree of deserve language that I've internalized will activate in the following way. Well, it's a good thing that you're feeling bad. You deserve to feel bad because you're a selfish and horrible little girl. And so we teach children, not all of us, obviously, but some of us grew up with some version of, if you're feeling bad, it means you did something bad, and the bad feeling is a punishment for that bad thing. And then we see a huge emergence of an increase in shame and guilt in our society that causes a lot more suffering for people. Because the old way of educating is to say that these are the things you need to do to be good, and if you're feeling bad, you deserve it because you're a bad person. and it messes up our ability to work with feelings effectively. Because we come into adulthood with a lot of underlying programming that is really, really punitive and really domination-oriented. With me so far? Okay. I'm hoping that this is good review of things that you already all know. Okay? Yes? Yes.
Is it okay to make a comment?
Yes, I'd love a comment.
I just told my colleagues here that I've read a brief snippet from Harvard Business Review, Daily Alerts. Oh, I just read a brief article from the Harvard Business Review. I get this email every day. And this one was on being authentic. And he related a story of an interaction with his daughter. And they got into an escalated fight over some sand he was making. And he was struggling because the way he communicated with her was, forceful and judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't feel, if he didn't do that, he felt like he wasn't being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And this notion of authenticity being this programming that you're talking about.
Yes.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's really not authentic. It's
Yes.
what you're used to it. It feels authentic.
Yes, yes.
And that's a pitfall.
I love that you bring that up. Thank you for making that point, because I can't tell you how many times I work with people who say to me, that is just who I am. Because we've identified with this programming. We make the mistake of attaching our sense of identity to our habits. And the habits that we have, generally, we just inherited from parents who inherited them from parents who inherited them from parents who were doing the best that they could given the generational struggles that they each were facing. They were adapting to whatever they needed to adapt to. And so we've inherited some things and then make the mistake of thinking that that's who I am. And I would suggest to you that that's one of the places where nonviolent communication and other tools like this can help you get a little bit of that observer self. That the way that I was trained to see the world and communicate and how I think through the world is one frame that I inherited. And if I can separate from that a little bit and have a different grounding in my sense of self, I will suddenly see that these are skills that I developed, and I can develop different skills in order to get into the heart of who I really am, so that that part of me that is compassionate, naturally compassionate and loving and seeking connection with other people, is able to come to the forefront instead of staying in hiding in a world that feels dangerous. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I love because it's a very important point that we're talking about really programming and habits that we come into adulthood with. So let's actually, I'm going to segue from there to the next thing, unless there is anything else you want me to say on this or that people would like to comment on this part. Good? Okay. All right. So here you are, you come into the world as a very vulnerable little being, and you get born into a particular family with its own strengths and weaknesses. Every single one of us comes from an imperfect family. You are not unique. And we all have varying degrees of traumatic experiences that we had as children. And this idea in modern society that there are these healthy people and these unhealthy people is ridiculous. There is human suffering, and we are all trying to work with human suffering. And so let's just understand the sort of communal nature of the different kinds of suffering that we all come into adulthood with, so that we can do something about it that is more effective than this old system of domination and internalized domination. So as a kid, you're coming in with a temperament, you're coming in with positioning in a family, you're coming in, some of us are not even coming into an attachment relationship in a family, so we're coming into a set of circumstances. And in this set of circumstances, we learn to position my sense of self, and I can be more oriented to myself, or I could be more oriented to an other. Right? Because in the dualistic frame, it's either you or me, and so we tend to come with that sort of developmental programming. So I'm either going to be really oriented to myself, or I tend to be really oriented to an other person. So oriented to myself, I'm happy to tell you what I'm feeling, and I tell you what I'm needing, and I tell you what I'm wanting. This happens when we're about 2 2 and 3, right? With all this enthusiasm, we come into the world and we're like ready to go. And I want to climb on that table and I want to eat these things. And then we start interacting and bumping with authority figures. And depending on our experiences, we either learn to really settle into that orientation to self without developing a lot of empathy for other people, because we, by a set of experiences, simply learn that the only thing that matters is you gorgeous child, and everybody else just needs to adapt to you. So some of us have more of that experience. Or you come into toddlerhood or whichever developmental stage, and you start doing these things, and your authority figures, whoever they may be, start saying, no, we don't do that. That is disgusting. No, blah, 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 right? And what you're doing is not acceptable, and you are too noisy, and you are too messy. And we suddenly realize, ooh, this piece of who I am is not okay. I need to suppress some of me because parts of me are not going to get me the love and safety that I want in this family. And so I orient to others. Yes, I go away to myself. Suddenly it's not safe to know what I'm feeling and needing. And I grow up in a family where I learn, ooh, I really need to watch out for what mom is feeling and needing. I really need to watch out for what dad is feeling and needing. And so I develop a particular hypervigilance skill in which I am oriented to other people as my strategy for getting my needs met as a kid. Or, on the other one, nobody ever tells me how they're feeling. Nobody ever teaches me about other people's subjective realities. So I kind of grow up thinking that the world really revolves around me. And I get to ask for what I want, and I get to expect to get it. And then we get into adulthood, and when it doesn't work that way, I have all kinds of growing up to do suddenly, and all kinds of issues that can come from that. But there's the frame. For most of us, we swing a little bit between either one. And you can think about in intimate relationships, it's the place where you do a lot of compromising, right? Oh, this will make my partner happy, so I'm just going to do this for them, and I don't really want to do blah, 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 but I'm going to do it for them. And if that builds up long enough, then you get to that place in the argument where you finally say, you know what, after everything that I've done for you, I cannot believe that you're not going to do this for me. And what about me? When do I get what I want? So for many of us, we sort of swing between these two things in conflicts, sort of the garden variety conflicts. Is this resonating? Okay, I do see nodding. I just want to check if there are questions about that. All right, here, my conflict style, this comes from the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Inventory. If you are familiar with that, or if you're interested in it, you can go read more about that. There are some great online trainings as well with that. But here I'm going to do a lot more fighting. Here I'm going to do a lot more avoiding. And here I'm going to do a lot more accommodating. So in nonviolent communication, what we think of a little bit here is that this is the dualistic-jackal frame, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, that we fall into, of either me or you. Either you get what you want, or I get what I want. And so we tend to do relationships in an either-or frame, where we sort of take turns. It's a little bit like a tennis match. And then our conversation style is a little bit like sending a tennis ball backwards and forwards, right? I'm going to tell you, and then you're going to tell me, and then I'm going to tell you. And so this is a little bit the quality of conversation. When we get into these states here, we are often operating out of a fight-flight system. We're perceiving some kind of a danger in the relationship, which in Marshall's terms would be that there's a threat to our needs getting met. We have a deep need that is coming up in that situation, and we don't believe it's going to get met, or it isn't being met. And so we pull on old strategies of evaluation, thinking, strategizing, and demanding. And in the nonviolent communication frame, Marshall uses two metaphors, one of a jackal and one of a giraffe. Some of you may be familiar with this. The jackal, you all know what a jackal is, right? It's a little fox coyote-like creature that runs around in Africa. It's a bit of a scavenger, right? So jackal language we use as a metaphor to talk about our old programming of domination. The part of us that speaks and sees the world through evaluation, thinking, strategy, and demand. And so this generally is what most of our communication boils down to, especially when we are in a fight, flight, freeze mode. Because I'm going to tell you what I think is wrong with you or me. I'm going to tell you all of my thoughts about why this has to do with your father's issues and why you need to get into therapy to go and heal all of these holes inside of you because you're not available to me in the way that I want you to be in this relationship. That's my strategy, right? And then I'm going to make that a demand. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't go and get 6 months of therapy, then this marriage is over. Or then I can't be in a relationship with you. And so this tends to be the kind of language that comes pretty naturally to many of us and the one through which we see and relate with others. It's also the language that today I'm going to invite you to leave behind. Primarily, when we are in jackal language, we are feeling some sort of fearfulness, some sort of anger. We have a deep need down here for self-protection. We see an increase in this of guilt and shame, of depression. And some of the things you had said at the very beginning of the day, that piece where that this is the internal struggle. If I show up, I'm going to be honest, and I'm going to tell you what I really think, but if these are the only language tools that I have or that I feel competent in, then I'm not going to be very nice. Or if I need to be nice because I don't want to hurt your feelings and I don't want to tell you this really aggressive part of me, then I'm going to self-silence and I'm going to accommodate you and I'm going to be quiet and be nice or tell you what you want to hear. And so these are some of the strategies that we develop interpersonally in order to try and stay connected and safe with people that we care about. But unfortunately, they don't get us very far. They don't work. They tend to come at a deep cost to the relationship. Either the relationship internally with myself or the relationship between the person and myself that I'm trying to work with. With me so far? Any questions on this? Yes?
I'm sort of pausing because that's my job.
This is most of our jobs. It's not only you.
Yeah, that's why I go to work, and that's
Yes.
sort of, and so I see this as a continuum that instead of a grid, but that sometimes I do need to be there, and then sometimes I need to move back off of it, but rather than that's never going to work versus.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. For me, the nonviolent communication model is one that both transcends and includes earlier ways of speaking. So I was going to address this. Some people said here that they want to put the judgments aside and they want to, there was another thing that somebody had wanted to put aside. How do we put this aside? I would encourage you to think of that a little differently. It's a little bit more for me about how do I detach from this, see it clearly, and remain in a place of choicefulness about what I'm going to do with it. But it requires integrating this. Our dualistic mind is going to tell us there's a good way to speak and a bad way to speak. Oh, Yvette just wrote on the board all of the bad ways to speak. That means I shouldn't do this anymore, and I'm going to have to do this other thing that she's going to talk about, and I have to not do this, and now I have an inner conflict. So if you find some of that happening today, I'd encourage you to think of it as a transcend and include, not a right and wrong. Is that helpful? Yeah, because there's extremely important information in this. So we want to learn how to work with this differently. This I equate a little bit to dog training. I don't want my Rottweiler running the house, but I want him there. Is that making sense? That's one metaphor that one might use. Okay. All right. Anything else before I jump on? Yes?
I wondered if, with your permission, your story, you evaluated the situation and then spoke to your daughter. You named something for your daughter. So without the ability to do those things you might have continued to react.
Mm-hmm.
So these do seem like important tools.
Yes.
Maybe is it occupational hazard if you use those in your work, that you use only those tools? You get so used to using those tools, that those are the ones you use.
So I love where you're going, and I'm about to make that that shift for you. I'm going to make that connection. Yes.
We train people like that. I send my managers to leadership training and exactly that. Evaluate, think, strategize, and act.
I have a doctoral degree in doing this. Okay, I've spent hundreds and thousands of dollars being certified in doing this well. And not only that, I really like this part of me, thank you very much. I feel really competent in this realm. And I wouldn't want you to tell me that that's a bad part of who I am. I also want to know how to work with this part of me more effectively if what I'm wanting to do is get connection, compassion, understanding, heartfelt connection with other people. Yes?
When you were explaining that as being one of those funny dialectics, would I be oversimplifying if I said you could evaluate, think, strategize, and demand when it comes to the thing, but you wouldn't want to do that with the people?
I don't know. I would have to think about that. Let's sit with that idea for a while and see how it percolates for you as we move through the next bit. How does that sound? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Business, whatever the things are, I mean, we do evaluate, think, and use strategizing, and make demands that are necessary to move the process forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People are feeling that they're being evaluated, and we're being evaluated by their thoughts, and being told what the strategies are for being a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's being demanded, and that stuff shuts you down.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I mean, I'd also just throw out there, I mean, I've ran a lot of various things in my career. It worked. What was my definition of work?
Yes.
What seems to be working, and it worked at a certain level, for sure.
Yes.
But could it have been a lot better? No doubt about it.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of all these strategies, it seems that the demanding is the one that sticks because you can evaluate, you can strategize in many different kinds of ways, logically and empathetically. Demanding, however, doesn't seem to have more than one way.
Yeah.
Could act it instead of demanding. That's a whole different thing.
Yes. Let's give you the other half of this, because right now it seems like this is sounding familiar, and we're seeing a little bit of where we're coming from, and we're longing a little bit for how this could be different, and our first strategy is figuring out ways of making this okay. Do you see us doing that? Because it's a little uncomfortable to start thinking that this thing that I'm really good at, you're saying might not be the most effective thing. Wait now, let me tell you why this is actually really useful, and don't too quickly vilify this part of who I am. So enjoy that part of yourself, because we're not vilifying any of this, but I think when I give you the other piece of it, it'll begin to show you how it all goes together. Yes, Karen, you wanted to add.
Before we turn the page, I had to laugh about the accommodating the other, because that's a really easy thing to do, and it feels good. And just remember someone where we both tried to accommodate for the other, not knowing it, and then at some point, we were driving somewhere, and I said, wait a minute, do you even want to go to this park? No, I'm doing it for you. And I said, well, I don't want to go to the park, I'm doing it for you. And so we had to develop a technique, because we were both so unconsciously good at accommodating to the other one.
Yes.
That we forgot to ask what the other one wanted.
Yes.
So then we were getting angry at each other for not wanting what we were accommodating to.
Because what we're doing, yes.
Thank you very much, and I'm planning to redeem that later for valuable prize.
I love that. I love your naming that. Because the other thing in that story is, so often we are doing things for telling ourselves we're doing it for somebody else, and it's not what they want at all. Right?
There's an ancient training movie about that called Going to Abilene. Anybody remember that? Where this family somehow decides they want to drive to Abilene. And on the way to Abilene, they all realize, I don't want to go to Abilene.
Yeah. And this is back to what somebody said earlier on about knowing my needs. If we don't know what we're actually needing, and we don't have ways of having effective conversation with the other about what they're actually needing, then we're already at a disadvantage. So somehow we want to work that back into this lovely foundation that we already have. So let's think about this as the foundation that we're building on, which is different than this bad thing we do that we shouldn't be doing. Sound good? Okay. So essentially then, yes, was there a question? No. Okay. So when we are going to start practicing, I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of the model of nonviolent communication. The first thing that we do before we open our mouths in any conversation is that we need to check in with our intention. So you ask yourself, when you're going to engage with this person, is my intention to connect with this person or to control this person? Because essentially we're going to be positioned in one of two ways. Either I'm going to engage with you in dialogue because there's something I want to control about the situation or about you, or I'm deeply interested in understanding something, connecting with you, or developing some kind of a shared reality with you. And depending upon your intention, you're going to get very different things in that conversation. Nonviolent communication starts with an intention to connect before we correct. Okay? So Marshall used to say it's very, very important to first connect with people before you do any kind of correcting of a situation, of a person, of anything. Partly because this example, Karen, that you brought in is lovely. You were both busy fixing a problem you didn't have, right? And so you're already correcting for something that wasn't even real in the situation. And if we slow down and we really have ways of connecting with one another, then the strategies that we choose in that situation are going to be well aligned to the people's needs, as opposed to a bunch of strategies projected upon and imposed on one another because we have good intentions. And so one of the ways that we then work with our desire to connect instead of control is by harnessing our powers of attention. And we begin working with what we attend to far more strategically than we may have before. In this practice, we work with 4 dialectics. And if we're going to get philosophical, I'll just put this out there. They actually are a circle where the 2 points are the same thing. So for anybody who wants to go there philosophically, you can. But let's think of them as a continuum, because it's a little simpler to be on a flat line today than to start going into another dimension. But I'll still put that out there. Here's the continuum that you're working with. The first one is, to what degree can I be in neutral observation as opposed to in my evaluative self? So when I'm thinking about this interaction between you and me, and think back now to the one that you began with at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day when I asked you to think of a situation, to what degree am I able to perceive the situation through observation versus my story? And you want to check in with yourself, how attached am I to the story? And how willing am I and able am I to get to a neutral observation? So this is now the discipline of the model. My husband and I have an ongoing argument about the dishwasher. I don't think any of you have any of these arguments in your households, perhaps, but we have an ongoing dishwasher argument. I like to put the pots and pans in the dishwasher and get them cleaned that way. He does not believe that putting pots and pans in the dishwasher is a good thing to do. And he's right. He knows he's right, right? And has presented me with multiple research articles and Google documents supporting his point of view. And I will simply take a picture of the pots and pans setting on the dishwasher, and there we are at an impasse. Okay. So there was a day, I'll tell you more about the story at some point, but there was a time where I had agreed I will not put the pots and pans in the dishwasher, and he was going to wash them. And so we'd come up with some strategy where we were going to, collaborate with one another. Because I think putting them in the dishwasher is just fine. So, and he really, really does not think that. So I'd agreed to do this, and so for many months we were fine. I was being very compliant with this request that he had made, but a piece of me felt like, I still don't think this. And so there was a Friday night that he was going to be out late, and I packed the dishwasher, and I'm holding this pan in my hand, and I'm like, it's going to run, and I'm going to have it unpacked before he gets home, so in it goes. And I'm going to wash it, because we do that. We do not like to be controlled by other people. So I put my little pan in the dishwasher, and Brett's away, and comes home in the morning, and he was out late, but he still gets up a lot earlier than I do. And so Saturday morning comes around, and I'm sleeping in, because it's one of my few luxurious days, except for today, where I get sleep in. And I'm half awake, and the bedroom door opens, and here's my husband with a frying pan. And he says to me, "What is this?" So it took me a few moments, because really I was bewildered in that moment. And I sat up and I looked at him and I said, "That's a frying pan." I had not connected the dots until he said, "Why was this in the dishwasher?" And then the penny dropped, and I went, "Oh, yeah, I hadn't actually unpacked the dishwasher before he came home, and he did it in the morning." And so I was caught. So if I'm going to tell you that story through evaluation, and I'm super stimulated about this, which I'm not, even though it's still an ongoing discussion, I might say, you will not believe how anal retentive my husband is. He is so controlling. I can't believe that he won't get over this silly little thing. That's my evaluation, potentially, right? My observation of what happened in that moment was, Brett opened the bedroom door, walked in, held up the frying pan, and said, "What is this?" My evaluation is, he's got anger issues and control issues, and I really don't appreciate the abusive way in which he walked into the bedroom and showed no concern for how I was feeling. So can you see how each frame sets you up for the next step differently? So this can be an internal dialectic that we begin working with. And what I'm going to have you do is go back to the situation that you began with this morning. I asked you this morning to start with your stories about what was happening. But I'd like you to just take a moment and just do this individually. Can you boil down a thing that the person says or doesn't say or doesn't do that provides the stimulus for an argument that is then going to ensue? And if that's hard for you, because sometimes what we'll say is that we have a story that, well, it's not just about him saying just this, it's the fact that he's done it 51 times that is the problem. It's not just that he came in late this one time, it's that there's a pattern of it. If that's sort of the nature of your issue, then you can own the memory and say, when you walk through the door half an hour after the agreed time, and I then remember 51 other times that this has happened, that could be a neutral observation. So just take 5 minutes right now, go back to your situation, and see if you can get to a neutral observation of where this argument that you have or this issue that you have with this person gets activated for you. Questions about that? I would gladly come over if you feel like you're getting stuck. Just take 5 minutes.